There comes a moment in every life when holding it all together becomes impossible. The smile you've been wearing starts to feel heavy. The prayers you've whispered seem to echo back in silence. The pieces of your heart that you've tried so hard to glue together begin to fall apart all over again. Maybe you've been carrying wounds no one knows about. Maybe you've mastered the art of looking strong while quietly breaking inside. You've told yourself to keep going, to keep fighting, to keep pretending everything is okay. But deep down, you're exhausted. Can I tell you something that might change everything today? God never asked you to carry what only He can heal. He never expected you to fix every broken piece before coming into His presence. He isn't waiting for a polished version of you. He's not asking for perfection. He's asking for surrender. Some of us have spent years hiding our pain because we thought brokenness disqualified us from God's love. But what if your broken pieces are not proof that God has abandoned you? What if they're the very place where His grace wants to meet you? Today isn't about pretending you're strong enough. It's about discovering what happens when you stop carrying the weight alone. It's about laying every shattered dream, every disappointment, every unanswered prayer, every regret, every fear, and every broken piece at the feet of the one who specializes in restoration. Because the same God who created beauty from chaos can create purpose from your pain. If your heart feels heavy today, if you've been wondering whether God still sees you, if you've been searching for hope in the middle of heartbreak, then stay with me. I truly believe this message is more than just words. It's an invitation to let go of what has been crushing your soul and trust the God who has never stopped holding you. There are seasons in life when everything around you seems to whisper the same painful lie. You are what happened to you. After enough disappointments, enough heartbreak, enough failures, and enough unanswered prayers, it's easy to believe that your brokenness has become your identity. You begin introducing yourself to the world through your pain instead of your purpose. You stop seeing yourself as someone created with value and start seeing yourself as someone defined by wounds. But that is never how God sees you. God has never looked at your broken places and concluded that they are the sum of who you are. He has always looked beyond the cracks and seen the masterpiece He designed before you ever took your first breath. Sometimes life has a way of convincing us that we are permanently damaged. A broken relationship makes you think you'll never be worthy of love again. A financial setback convinces you that you'll never recover. A mistake from years ago continues to haunt your thoughts until you begin believing your future has already been written by your past. Every painful experience leaves a mark, and if we're not careful, those marks become labels. We stop saying, I experienced failure, and start saying, I am a failure. We stop saying, I went through rejection, and start believing, I am rejected. There is a dangerous difference between something you experienced and someone you are. The enemy loves when people confuse their condition with their identity. Why? Because if he can convince you that your brokenness is your name, you'll never pursue the future God has prepared for you. You'll settle for surviving instead of thriving. You'll avoid opportunities because you think you're unqualified. You'll stop praying bold prayers because you assume God has moved on without you. But the truth is that your identity has never been determined by your lowest moment. It has always been determined by the God who created you with intention, love, and purpose. Think about how often we try to hide the parts of ourselves that feel broken. We become experts at pretending everything is fine. We smile when we're hurting. We encourage everyone else while secretly feeling empty ourselves. We convince ourselves that if people discover our struggles, they'll see us differently. Yet the amazing thing about God is that He already knows every hidden wound, every silent tear, every private battle, and He still calls you His beloved. He isn't surprised by your weakness. He isn't disappointed by your scars. He isn't waiting for you to become flawless before He embraces you. His love reaches you exactly where you are. Many people spend years trying to earn an identity that God has already given them. They work harder, achieve more, serve longer, and chase approval from people, hoping that one day they'll finally feel valuable. But your value has never depended on your performance. It has never been measured by your accomplishments, your popularity, your income, or your ability to keep everything together. Your value comes from the one who formed you, breathed life into you, and declared that your life has purpose before anyone else had an opinion about you. The beautiful thing about brokenness is that while it may affect your circumstances, it never changes God's perspective of you. People may look at your mistakes and see failure. God looks at your heart and sees possibility. People may remember your worst chapter. God sees the entire story. People may define you by what you've lost. God defines you by what he is still able to do through you. Heaven has never canceled your purpose because of your pain. There are moments when you may feel like you've fallen too far to get back up. Maybe you've asked yourself questions like, can God still use someone like me, or have I ruined the plans he had for my life? Those questions often come from shame, not truth. Shame tells you that because you've been broken, you're no longer useful. Grace reminds you that God has always specialized in using imperfect people to accomplish extraordinary things. Throughout history, God has chosen ordinary people with messy stories, painful pasts, and visible weaknesses. Their brokenness didn't disqualify them. It became the place where his power was revealed. Your scars tell a story, but they are not the title of your life. They are evidence that you survived what was meant to destroy you. Every challenge you've endured has taught you something about resilience, dependence on God, and the strength you never knew you possessed. While you may wish some chapters had never happened, God has an incredible way of bringing purpose out of pain. He wastes nothing. Even the experiences you wish you could erase can become part of the testimony that encourages someone else to keep believing. You don't have to introduce yourself by your failures anymore. You don't have to wake up every morning carrying labels that God never placed on you. You are not your divorce. You are not your addiction. You are not your anxiety. You are not your financial struggles. You are not your childhood trauma. You are not the opinion someone spoke over your life years ago. Those things may have touched your journey, but they have never defined your identity. God speaks to the person beneath the pain. He speaks to the dream beneath the disappointment. He speaks to the hope buried beneath years of hurt. He calls out the purpose that still lives inside you, even when you've forgotten it's there. While life may have left you feeling fractured, heaven still calls you chosen, loved, valuable, and worthy of redemption. The broken pieces you're carrying today are real, but they are temporary. They do not have the authority to rename the person God created you to be. One of the greatest invitations God has ever extended to humanity is not an invitation to prove ourselves, impress him, or pretend that everything is fine. It is an invitation to come just as we are and lay every burden at his feet. Yet for so many of us, this is one of the hardest things to do. We carry emotional weight that was never meant for our shoulders. We hold on to guilt, fear, disappointment, anxiety, regret, and heartbreak as though somehow carrying them will solve them. We become so accustomed to living under the pressure that we forget what freedom even feels like. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to tell someone else to trust God while secretly struggling to trust him yourself? We encourage others to surrender their worries, but when it comes to our own lives, we grip tightly to every problem. We replay conversations in our minds. We imagine every possible outcome. We lose sleep trying to control situations that are completely outside our hands. Somewhere along the way, we begin acting as though everything depends on us. But God never asked you to carry the responsibility of being your own savior. He simply asked you to trust the one who already is. There is something beautiful about the feet of God. Throughout Scripture, people came to him carrying impossible situations. Some came with sickness, others came with grief, some came with shame, while others came with questions they couldn't answer. They didn't arrive because they had everything figured out. They came because they had reached the end of themselves. They discovered that when human strength ran out, God's strength was more than enough. Many of us are exhausted because we've been trying to fight battles that belong to God. We carry the burden of fixing everyone around us. We feel responsible for changing people who don't want to change. We blame ourselves for things we couldn't prevent. We keep reopening old wounds because we think if we analyze them long enough, we'll finally find peace. But peace doesn't come from carrying heavier burdens. Peace comes from placing those burdens into hands that are stronger than yours. God never intended for your heart to become a storage room for pain. He created your heart to be a place where hope could grow, where faith could flourish, and where love could overflow. Every time you hold on to bitterness, resentment, or fear, those burdens begin occupying space that was meant for God's peace. The longer you carry them, the heavier they become. What started as disappointment slowly becomes despair. What began as worry grows into anxiety. What was once a single painful memory becomes a prison that limits your future. Sometimes we convince ourselves that letting go means giving up. It doesn't. Surrender is not the same as quitting. Surrender is choosing to place your confidence in God instead of your own understanding. It is admitting that His wisdom is greater than yours, His timing is better than yours, and His plans reach further than your imagination ever could. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop believing that everything rests on your shoulders. Think about how often we carry invisible burdens that no one else can see. The pressure to always be strong, the fear of disappointing people, the weight of expectations that seem impossible to meet, the pain of unanswered prayers, the sadness of dreams that haven't come true. We smile in public while carrying silent battles in private. We convince ourselves that if we just hold on a little longer, maybe we'll figure everything out. But some burdens become lighter only when they're surrendered. God's invitation is deeply personal. He doesn't simply say, bring some of your burdens. He invites you to bring all of them. The obvious struggles and the hidden ones, the fears you've spoken aloud and the tears you've cried in silence, the mistakes you're ashamed of and the disappointments you don't understand. Nothing is too small for His attention, and nothing is too large for His power. Perhaps the reason you felt so weary isn't because life has been unusually difficult, but because you've been carrying things you were never designed to carry. Imagine trying to carry a load that grows heavier every single day. Eventually, your strength would fail, your knees would weaken, your steps would slow. That's exactly what happens spiritually when we refuse to surrender our burdens. We become emotionally drained, mentally exhausted, and spiritually discouraged because we're depending on limited strength instead of unlimited grace. God isn't asking you to clean up your burdens before bringing them to Him. He's not asking you to organize your pain or explain every emotion perfectly. He simply asks you to come. He already knows what you're carrying. He knows every fear that keeps you awake at night. He knows every disappointment that still hurts when you think about it. He knows every question you've been afraid to ask. And despite knowing it all, His invitation remains open. There is incredible freedom in admitting that you cannot do everything on your own. The world often celebrates self-sufficiency, but faith teaches dependence on God. True strength isn't pretending you have no weaknesses. True strength is recognizing where your strength ends and God's strength begins. Every burden you surrender creates room for His peace. Every fear you release makes space for His confidence. Every worry you place before Him opens your heart to hope once again. You may not see every answer immediately after surrendering your burdens. Some situations take time to unfold. Some prayers require patience. Some healing happens little by little instead of all at once. But even while the circumstances remain unchanged, something begins changing inside you. The weight you've been carrying no longer controls you because you've entrusted it to someone greater than yourself. Your heart becomes lighter, not because every problem disappears overnight, but because you finally realize you were never meant to face them alone. God's feet are not just a place where burdens are dropped. They are a place where weary souls find rest, anxious hearts discover peace, and broken lives begin to experience hope again. Every burden you continue to carry in your own strength is an opportunity to trust Him more deeply. Every painful situation becomes another chance to remember that God has never asked you to hold what He is more than willing to carry for you. Healing is something every heart longs for, yet it often begins in a place most people try to avoid. We naturally want healing without surrender, restoration without release, and peace without letting go. We ask God to change our circumstances while quietly holding on to the very things that keep us wounded. But there comes a moment when we realize that God cannot fill hands that refuse to open. Healing begins the moment we stop clinging to our pain and start trusting the one who has the power to restore us. Surrender is often misunderstood. Many people think surrender means weakness, defeat, or giving up. In reality, surrender is one of the greatest acts of faith a person can make. It is saying, God, I don't understand everything that's happening, but I trust that you do. I don't know how this story ends, but I believe you're already there. I can't carry this anymore, so I'm placing it in your hands. That kind of surrender doesn't make you weak. It makes room for God's strength to become visible in your life. One of the hardest things to surrender is control. We like knowing what's coming next. We want clear answers, predictable outcomes, and guarantees that everything will work out according to our plans. But life rarely follows our schedule. Unexpected loss, disappointment, betrayal, and unanswered questions remind us that we were never truly in control to begin with. The longer we fight to control everything, the more exhausted we become. Healing starts when we stop trying to control every outcome and begin trusting God's wisdom instead of our own. Many people are carrying wounds that have been hidden for years. On the outside, they appear successful, confident, and happy, but inside, there are scars from rejection, abandonment, broken relationship, painful memories, and words that were spoken over them long ago. Time alone does not heal every wound. Sometimes time simply teaches us how to hide our pain more effectively. We become experts at functioning while still hurting. We convince ourselves that because we're surviving, we're healed. But surviving is not the same as healing. God never intended for you to spend your life pretending your pain doesn't exist. He invites you to bring every broken place into His presence, not because He wants to shame you, but because He wants to restore you. The wounds you hide from God are the very places where His healing wants to flow. He already knows every tear you've cried, every disappointment you've experienced, and every fear you've carried. Nothing about your pain surprises Him. What He desires is your willingness to trust Him with it. Sometimes surrender means releasing people. There are relationships we've tried desperately to save, conversations we've replayed 1,000 times, and disappointments we've carried because we keep hoping someone will become who they never chose to be. Holding on to people who continue to wound you often prevents your own healing. Surrender doesn't always mean the relationship is restored. Sometimes it means placing that person in God's hands and allowing Him to work while you move forward in peace. Other times, surrender means releasing your version of how life was supposed to unfold. We all have expectations. We picture certain careers, relationships, opportunities, and dreams. When those expectations aren't fulfilled, disappointment settles into our hearts. We may continue loving God while secretly grieving the life we imagined. Healing begins when we stop worshiping our plans and begin trusting God's purpose. His plan may not always look the way we expected, but His purpose is always greater than our understanding. There are also moments when surrender means forgiving. Forgiveness is one of the most difficult journeys because it feels unfair. Why should you release someone who hurt you? Why should you let go when they haven't apologized? But forgiveness isn't about pretending the pain never happened. It's about refusing to let someone else's actions continue controlling your future. Unforgiveness changed your heart to yesterday. Forgiveness opens the door to tomorrow. It doesn't excuse what happened, but it frees you from carrying its weight forever. Healing is rarely instant. We often wish God would remove every painful memory in a single moment. Sometimes He does perform miraculous transformations, but many times healing happens step by step. Every day you choose faith over fear, hope over despair, and trust over anxiety, your heart becomes a little stronger. Every prayer, every act of obedience, and every decision to keep believing even when you don't see immediate results is part of God's healing process. The beautiful thing about God's healing is that He doesn't simply cover wounds. He transforms them. The places where you once experienced the greatest pain often become the places where you discover the deepest compassion. The struggles that nearly broke you become the testimony that gives someone else hope. The tears you once cried in secret become reminders of God's faithfulness when you look back and see how far He has brought you. Many people delay healing because they fear what life will look like without their pain. It sounds strange, but sometimes we become so familiar with our wounds that they begin shaping our identity. We don't know who we are without them. We've lived with disappointment for so long that hope feels unfamiliar. We've carried anxiety for years, so peace almost feels uncomfortable. Yet God never created you to live imprisoned by what happened to you. He created you to walk in freedom. Even if the journey there takes time, surrender is not a one-time event. It's often a daily decision. Every morning you wake up with another opportunity to trust God again. Some days you'll have to surrender the same fear repeatedly. Some days you'll place the same unanswered question at His feet once more. That doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're learning to depend on Him instead of yourself. Every act of surrender strengthens your faith and reminds your heart where true security is found. Healing doesn't begin when every circumstance changes. Healing begins when your heart says, God, I trust you more than I trust my fear. I trust you more than my disappointment. I trust you more than my own understanding. That moment of surrender becomes the foundation upon which God builds restoration. As you release what you've been holding so tightly, you make room for His peace. His strength, His wisdom, and His love to flow into every broken place, proving that what you surrender to God is never truly lost. It is transformed by His grace. One of the greatest challenges of faith is learning to trust God when nothing seems to be changing. It's easy to believe when prayers are answered quickly, when doors open without delay, and when life unfolds according to our expectations. But what happens when days turn into months and months turn into years? What happens when you've prayed with all your heart, yet the healing hasn't come, the breakthrough hasn't appeared, and the answers remain silent? Those are the moments when your faith is no longer based on what you can see. It becomes rooted in who God is. We live in a world that celebrates instant results. We can order food in minutes, receive information in seconds, and communicate with people across the world almost immediately. Without realizing it, we begin expecting God to work with the same speed. We want immediate restoration, immediate peace, immediate clarity, and immediate miracles. But God's work in our lives is often much deeper than a quick solution. He isn't only interested in changing your circumstances, He is transforming your heart. Waiting can feel uncomfortable because it forces us to confront our fears. While we wait, questions begin filling our minds. Did God hear my prayer? Have I done something wrong? Has He forgotten about me? These questions are common, but they are not always truthful. God's silence should never be mistaken for God's absence. Just because you cannot see Him working doesn't mean He has stopped moving. Some of His greatest work happens beneath the surface, where your eyes cannot yet see. Think about a seed planted in the ground. For a long time, nothing appears to happen. The soil looks exactly the same day after day. If someone judged a process by appearance alone, they might conclude that nothing is growing. But underneath the surface, roots are developing. Life is forming in hidden places before it ever becomes visible. God's restoration often follows the same pattern. Before He changes what everyone else can see, He strengthens what only He can see. Many people become discouraged because they compare their journey to someone else's. They see others receiving blessings while they continue waiting. They watch people move ahead while they feel stuck in the same place. Comparison quietly steals gratitude and replaces it with frustration. But God has never asked you to measure your timeline against someone else's. Every person's journey is different because every purpose is different. The timing that seems perfect for one life may not be the timing needed for another. Sometimes God delays what you desire because He is preparing you for what you're asking Him to receive. Imagine receiving a blessing before your character is ready to sustain it. Imagine walking through a door before you've developed the wisdom to remain there. God's preparation is never punishment. His delays are often expressions of His love. He sees the entire picture while we only see one chapter. What feels like waiting to us may actually be preparation in His hands. There is also something powerful that happens inside a waiting season. Patience begins to grow. Trust becomes stronger. Dependence on God becomes deeper. If every prayer were answered instantly, we might celebrate the blessing but never develop the relationship. Waiting teaches us to seek God's presence instead of only pursuing His promises. It reminds us that knowing Him is greater than simply receiving what we ask for. Restoration is rarely a straight line. There are days when you feel stronger, hopeful, and full of faith. Then suddenly an old memory returns, a painful reminder appears, or an unexpected setback makes you wonder if you've made any progress at all. Healing often moves forward in small steps rather than giant leaps. Don't mistake slow progress for failure. Every step forward matters, even when it feels insignificant. God celebrates the growth you sometimes overlook. It's important to remember that restoration is not simply about getting back what was lost. Sometimes God restores by giving you something entirely new. We often ask Him to rebuild yesterday while He is preparing tomorrow. We pray for old opportunities to return, but God may have greater opportunities waiting ahead. We ask for the relationship that ended while He prepares a healthier future. We hold tightly to our version of restoration without realizing that God's version is always greater than what we imagined. There will be moments when trusting God's timing requires letting go of your own schedule. You may have planned for certain dreams to happen by a certain age. You may have expected your family, career, ministry, or personal life to look very different by now. Disappointment often grows from the gap between our expectations and reality. But faith reminds us that God's calendar has never been controlled by human deadlines. He sees opportunities that haven't arrived yet, people you haven't met yet, and doors that haven't opened yet. Every delay carries an opportunity to grow closer to God instead of growing bitter toward Him. You can allow waiting to produce frustration, or you can allow it to deepen your faith. You can spend your energy questioning His goodness, or you can remember His faithfulness in seasons that have already passed. Looking back often reminds us that God has carried us through situations we once thought would destroy us. The same God who was faithful then remains faithful now. Trusting God's timing doesn't mean you'll never feel discouraged. It doesn't mean you'll never cry or ask difficult questions. Even faithful people experience moments of weakness. What matters is choosing to keep believing even when emotions fluctuate. Faith is not the absence of struggle. Faith is continuing to walk with God through the struggle. As restoration unfolds, you'll often realize that God was working in ways you never recognized while you were waiting. The closed doors protected you from places you weren't meant to go. The delays prepared you for responsibilities you weren't yet ready to carry. The disappointments redirected you toward opportunities you couldn't have imagined. Looking back, you'll see that what once felt like silence was actually God carefully arranging every detail according to His perfect wisdom. The timing of God is never random. It is intentional, loving, and purposeful. While you may wish the journey were shorter, every step has meaning. Every lesson is shaping your character. Every challenge is strengthening your faith. Every season of waiting is preparing you for the restoration that only God can bring. And when that restoration finally arrives, you'll understand that He wasn't making you wait without reason. He was making sure that when the blessing came, you would be ready to receive it, appreciate it, and use it for His glory. There comes a point in every person's journey where moving forward requires letting something go. You cannot step into the future God has prepared while holding tightly to everything that belongs to your past. Yet this is one of the hardest lessons to learn. We become attached to old pain, old disappointments, old regrets, and even old versions of ourselves. We carry them everywhere we go, hoping that somehow they will eventually make sense. But instead of helping us move forward, they quietly keep us standing still. The past has a powerful voice. It reminds you of every mistake you've made, every opportunity you missed, every relationship that ended, and every dream that didn't come true. If you listen to it long enough, you'll begin believing that your best days are behind you. You'll convince yourself that because something didn't work out once, it never will. But God has never asked you to build your future around yesterday's disappointments. He calls you to trust Him with what lies ahead, not remain imprisoned by what lies behind. One of the greatest burdens people carry is regret. We replay old decisions over and over in our minds, wondering what would have happened if we had chosen differently. We imagine different conversations, different opportunities, and different outcomes. We tell ourselves that if we could somehow return to that one moment, everything would be better. But while regret constantly looks backward, God's grace always invites you forward. You cannot rewrite your past, but through God's mercy, your past does not have to rewrite your future. Many people believe they have permanently disqualified themselves because of poor choices. They think their mistakes have canceled God's purpose for their lives. Shame whispers that because you failed, you'll never be trusted again. But God has never been limited by human failure. Throughout history, He has taken broken people, restored them, and used them in ways they never imagined possible. His grace has always been greater than human weakness. What disqualifies you in the eyes of people does not remove you from the reach of God's love. Letting go also means releasing the pain caused by others. Some wounds were not your fault. People may have betrayed your trust, spoken hurtful words, abandoned you when you needed them most, or treated you unfairly. Those experiences leave deep scars. They shape how you see yourself, how you trust others, and sometimes even how you relate to God. The pain is real, and God never asks you to pretend otherwise, but He also doesn't want your future to remain controlled by someone else's actions. When you continue carrying yesterday's pain, you unknowingly give it permission to influence today's decisions. You hesitate to love because you've been hurt before. You resist trusting because someone betrayed you. You avoid dreaming because disappointment once shattered your hopes. Little by little, your past begins making decisions for your future. That's not the freedom God desires for your life. He wants your future to be shaped by His promises, not by your fears. Forgiveness is often the bridge between the past and the future. It is not saying that what happened was acceptable. It is not pretending the wound didn't hurt. Forgiveness is choosing to release your right to carry bitterness any longer. Bitterness feels powerful for a moment, but over time it becomes a prison. The person who hurt you may have moved on, yet your heart remains chained to the memory. Forgiveness breaks those chains. It doesn't erase the past, but it removes its power to define your tomorrow. There are also dreams that must be surrendered. Sometimes we spend years chasing something God never intended for us. We become so focused on one particular outcome that we miss the greater opportunities He places before us. Closed doors often feel like rejection, but they can actually be divine protection. What feels like loss today may become one of the greatest blessings you recognize tomorrow. God's no is never meant to harm you. It is often His way of guiding you towards something far better than what you could currently see. Peace enters your life when you stop fighting battles that have already ended. Some arguments don't need another response. Some disappointments don't need another explanation. Some relationships don't need another attempt to force what God has allowed to end. There is wisdom in recognizing when a chapter has closed. Holding on to what God is asking you to release only delays the new beginning He wants to give you. The peace God offers is different from the temporary relief the world provides. The world says peace comes when every problem disappears. God says peace is possible even while you're walking through uncertainty. His peace isn't dependent on perfect circumstances. It is rooted in His constant presence. Even when life feels unpredictable, His peace becomes an anchor that keeps your heart steady through every storm. Choosing peace is often a daily decision. Every morning you have the opportunity to decide whether you'll rehearse old pain or remember God's faithfulness. You can spend your day replaying yesterday's disappointments, or you can fill your heart with hope for what God is still able to do. Thoughts shape emotions, and emotions influence actions. The more your mind dwells on God's promises instead of your past, the stronger your faith becomes. Sometimes moving forward feels frightening because the past, even with all its pain, is familiar. The unknown can seem intimidating. But faith has always required stepping into places you've never been before. God rarely reveals the entire journey at once. He simply asks for your next step. Every step of obedience creates room for greater confidence. Every act of trust reminds you that God has never abandoned those who place their hope in Him. Your story is not over because one chapter was painful. A difficult season does not determine the ending of your life. There are still prayers to be answered, relationships to be restored, opportunities to be discovered, and dreams to be awakened. God's plans extend far beyond the disappointments you've experienced. The future He has prepared cannot be fully embraced while your hands remain tightly closed around yesterday's burdens. As you release the weight of the past, something remarkable begins to happen. Your heart becomes lighter. Your vision becomes clearer. Hope slowly replaces fear. Joy begins returning where sorrow once lived. You discover that peace is not found by changing yesterday, but by trusting God with today. Every burden you leave behind creates space for new strength. Every regret you surrender makes room for fresh purpose. Every painful memory you place into God's hands becomes another reminder that His grace is greater than your past. His mercy is stronger than your failures, and His peace is able to carry you confidently into the future He has lovingly prepared for you. There is a beautiful difference between merely surviving life and truly walking in the freedom God has prepared for you. For many people, life becomes a constant cycle of getting through one day only to worry about the next. They wake up carrying yesterday's burdens, spend the day battling today's challenges, and go to bed fearing tomorrow's uncertainties. But God never intended for your life to be defined by endless survival. His desire is that you walk forward with a heart that has been restored, a mind filled with hope, and a spirit strengthened by faith. Walking forward does not mean your past suddenly disappears. The memories may still exist. Certain scars may remain. There may still be moments when old emotions try to resurface. But healing changes the way those memories affect you. What once controlled your thoughts no longer has authority over your life. The pain that once defined your identity becomes part of the testimony of God's faithfulness. You no longer look back with hopelessness. Instead, you look back with gratitude because you can see how God carried you through every difficult season. One of the greatest victories you can experience is realizing that you are no longer the same person who entered the storm. Trials have a way of changing us. They teach us lessons that comfort never could. They reveal strength we never knew we possessed. They deepen our dependence on God in ways success often cannot. When you allow God to work through your brokenness, you emerge with greater wisdom, stronger faith, and deeper compassion for others who are struggling. Hope is essential for moving forward. Without hope, every obstacle feels permanent. Every delay seems like defeat. Every setback appears to be the end of the story. But hope reminds you that God is still writing chapters you haven't yet read. Just because today feels difficult doesn't mean tomorrow cannot bring restoration. Just because one door has closed doesn't mean another one isn't already being prepared. Hope allows you to keep expecting God's goodness even when your circumstances have not yet caught up with His promises. Walking by faith also requires resisting the temptation to return to old patterns. Sometimes the familiar feels safer than the unknown. Even unhealthy habits can become comfortable simply because we've lived with them for so long. Fear may invite you back into anxiety. Bitterness may try to reclaim your heart. Doubt may whisper that nothing has really changed. But every day you have the opportunity to make a different choice. You can choose trust over fear. You can choose forgiveness over resentment. You can choose peace over worry. Those daily choices gradually shape the direction of your life. Faith is not simply believing that God exists. Faith is believing that His promises remain true even when circumstances suggest otherwise. It is waking up each morning convinced that God's goodness has not changed overnight. It is continuing to pray when answers seem delayed. It is continuing to obey when the path ahead is unclear. Faith keeps moving forward because it trusts the character of God more than the appearance of present circumstances. As you walk forward, you'll encounter people who are carrying burdens similar to the ones you once carried. They may be discouraged, broken, uncertain, or searching for hope. The comfort God has given you was never intended to stop with you. Your story becomes a source of encouragement for someone else's journey. The lessons you learn through pain become wisdom that strengthens another weary heart. What once felt like your greatest weakness becomes one of the greatest ways God touches the lives of others. Never underestimate the influence of a life transformed by God's grace. People notice genuine peace. They recognize authentic joy. They are drawn to quiet confidence that remains steady even during difficult seasons. Your life becomes evidence that restoration is possible. You may never realize how many people are watching your example, finding courage because they see what God has done in you. Every faithful step you take creates hope for someone who wonders if healing is possible. Walking forward also means continuing to grow. Spiritual maturity is not a destination you reach once and never revisit. Every season brings new opportunities to trust God more deeply. New challenges reveal new areas where faith can grow. As you continue walking with Him, your relationship becomes stronger. Prayer becomes more natural. Gratitude becomes more consistent. Peace becomes less dependent on circumstances and more rooted in God's presence. There will still be days when life feels overwhelming. Faith does not eliminate every struggle. Even after healing begins, unexpected disappointments can arise. New challenges may appear without warning, but now you face those moments differently. Instead of depending only on your own strength, you remember the faithfulness of God. Instead of allowing fear to lead your decisions, you let His promises guide your heart. Every past victory becomes evidence that the God who carried you before will continue carrying you again. The future no longer has to be something you fear. It can become something you anticipate with confidence, not because you know every detail of what lies ahead, but because you know the one who goes before you. God has already stepped into every tomorrow you will ever face. Nothing surprises Him. Nothing catches Him unprepared. Every opportunity, every challenge, every unexpected turn has already been seen through His eyes. That truth allows your heart to rest even when the road ahead remains uncertain. Living with hope does not mean ignoring reality. It means believing that reality is never greater than God's power. Living by faith does not mean denying pain. It means refusing to let pain have the final word. Walking forward does not mean pretending you've never been broken. It means celebrating the fact that God has been faithfully putting every broken piece back together. Each new day becomes another opportunity to reflect His goodness, trust His guidance, and embrace His purpose for your life. You are no longer defined by what tried to break you. You are strengthened by what God has brought you through. You are no longer walking alone, carrying impossible burdens on your shoulders. You are walking with the confidence that your steps are guided by a faithful God whose plans are filled with hope, whose grace is renewed every morning, and whose love will continue leading you into a future brighter than anything your past could have ever imagined.